Let's talk tropes. Hi everyone, I'm the Garrulous Gecko, and today we're talking about two tropes. We're going to talk about the cute but psycho character and psycho lesbians. First and foremost, let me just say that words like psycho, psychotic, and psychopath are pretty problematic because they create a monolithic idea of mental illness in the minds of neurotypicals. So are people who suffer from mental illness violent because of their illness? It can happen, but it's pretty rare. There are also people who are violent for other reasons or not violent at all who suffer from mental illness. So it's unfair to assume that all these people are suffering from the same thing or are... So when we're talking about the psycho lesbian in this instance, what we're actually saying is this is someone who is unstable emotionally and violent. Still problematic, but we'll talk about that later on in the video. Let's define some tropes. The cute but psycho is something that we see pretty often, but kind of tend to forget, like Bernadette from The Big Bang Theory. She's cute and friendly and even has a childlike voice, but when she gets mad, boy, does she get mad.
I'm gonna go home and have sex with my husband right now. Maybe I'll let him do it to me in a parking spot. Which sounds dirty, but I didn't mean it that way.
And I couldn't tell you when or where this trope came from, but my theory is humans love juxtaposition. It had great comedic effect when people didn't take mental health so seriously. Someone who falls into this trope has two very distinct sides to their personality. They have the very cute, normal side, and then the unhinged side. The cute but psycho character is usually a cis female and occasionally is a cis male, or this motherfucker. It shows up more in anime than anything else and is closely related to the yandere trope. To get a better idea of how this trope takes shape, let's take a look at Yukako from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Season 3. As a shonen from the 90s, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is dominated by male characters and meant for a male audience. So the few women who do show up are meant to be sexy plot devices, and Yukako is hardly an exception. Although she does continue to be a small part of the cast for the remainder of the season. When Yukako first appears, she's demure and shy, and her cuteness is referred to several times, so that you, as an audience member, know that she is, in fact, cute. She invites Koichi to meet her at a diner to confess her love to him. She repeatedly says things like, "I hope it's not a bother," or "I hope you don't hate me," just to cement her into her cute role. But when Koichi isn't able to answer her question right away, her unhinged side makes its surprise appearance. She slams her fist down on the table and demands Koichi answer her. Realizing what she's done, she quickly apologizes and scurries off, tears sparkling in the wind. But we know something's up. The next day, Koichi is cleaning the science lab when Yukako appears behind him with a box lunch for them both. She apologizes for being weird, but her actions say that she's not actually sorry. She just knows it's the socially acceptable thing to do to apologize. She sits down with the lunch and attempts to feed it to Koichi, which might have been cute if they were dating, but in this scenario was really weird and uncomfortable. Koichi is saved from the awkwardness when the class representative shows up and tells them to take out the trash, to which Yukako thinks that she's flirting with Koichi and threatens her. But when the class rep talks back, Yukako attempts to murder her. She literally lights her hair on fire, gags her, and blinds her, with her magical hair, of course. So now we realize that not only is Yukako delusional, but she's violent, temperamental, and vicious. So Okuyasu and Josuke come up with a plan to get Yukako to dislike Koichi. They start talking loudly when Yukako walks by about how Koichi has no future because he likes to steal and cheat on tests. However, instead of this making her dislike Koichi, she thinks it's an opportunity to make him a better man. So she kidnaps him and breaks into someone else's house to keep him there.
No need to worry, I'm here for you now.
She then meticulously plans out a way to force Koichi to study by essentially torturing him. She makes him answer multiple choice questions correlating to different food items. If he gets the question wrong, he gets to eat weird shit like erasers. If he gets the question right, he gets normal food. Additionally, she locks the bathroom door with a number lock that correlates to the year that Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. That Christopher Columbus discovered the new land, quote unquote. all of this causing Koichi essentially to starve and piss himself. When Koichi tries to make Yukako see that he's miserable, she makes it clear that she's not bothered by his bodily fluids, because she loves him. And she loves him even more because she thinks he has a trump card to escape, and she wants to know what that is. After we discover she's making an electric chair, she goes out for olive oil and Koichi makes his move, only to get caught and get warned that Yukako won't let him leave until he admits he loves her. She discovers that Koichi has a stand just like her and thinks that this is some sort of fate, that they have the same values, and therefore are meant to be together. When Josuke and Okuyasu show up and Koichi's stand reverb evolves, Yukako starts to get really pissed off, to the point that she is about to kill Koichi so he can live forever in her memory, if he doesn't say he loves her. But unfortunately, she is a girl in a 90s anime, and the only thing she loves more than Koichi is her own beauty. So when Koichi blows her away with reverb and her hair turns white, she's prepared to kill him, not to preserve his memory, but because he made her ugly. Finally, at the end of the episode, she seems to have learned something when the cliff she's standing on breaks and she's about to fall to her death, and instead is trampolined back up by Koichi's stand power. She realizes that while she was trying to kill him, he was thinking of ways to save her because he knew she wouldn't listen when he told her to step away from the cliff. This makes her snap out of her violent delusion and fall in love with Koichi all over again. So let me just point out, this isn't how delusions work. This isn't how psychosis works. This isn't how mental health works. And this isn't how girls work. And yes, this is from the 90s, and the 90s were problematic. But portrayals of mental illness and women like this haven't stopped. We still see boring-ass female characters who only care about dating and being pretty, and we still see characters that go into this psychotic rampage. But I'll wait until the end of the video to talk about it more. Next, let's talk about the Psycho Lesbian trope. She's built about the same as the cute but psycho girl, but with more of a history. Like I mentioned in the Bury Your Gaze episode, there were lots of laws in place in the 1900s and earlier that limited what we can put in movies, like the Hays Code of 1934. Queer characters were considered indecent and morally bankrupt, so anyone who wrote a sympathetic queer character could get into legal trouble for supporting the gay agenda. David Lynch's film Mulholland Drive came out in 2001 and was still in the midst of some troublesome stereotypes. The majority of the film follows Betty and Rita after Rita escapes a car accident with nothing but a concussion and amnesia. Betty is excited to be in Los Angeles for the first time and wants to play detective to figure out what happened to Rita. Well, nothing particularly gay happens for like 2/3 of the film. There is some foreshadowing when Betty accidentally walks into Rita in the shower. Fast forward to the end of the film, we see that Rita, who's actually Camilla, was on her way to her boyfriend, angsty director guy's house, when she got into the accident. But it wasn't an accident at all. It was planned by Camilla's ex-girlfriend, Diane, who was heartbroken that Camilla would leave her for a man. But Camilla didn't become straight. In fact, we see her kiss another woman in the scene where her and Adam are about to announce their big news. Although that sequence is more to show Camilla becoming the blonde Camilla, becoming the cowboy, we won't get into any film theories right now, because we'll be here all day. So moving on, the point is that kiss is the last crushing blow that sends Diane into her psychotic rage. But before that, let's talk about Camilla. So Camilla is a lot of problematic ideas all smushed into one. First off, she can't just be a lesbian because it's 2001 and that's a no-no. So she becomes bisexual so that at least men can get off on watching her. Laura Mulvey, in her article, Visual Pleasure in Narrative Cinema, argues that the magic of Hollywood lies in their ability to use scopophilia, or the pleasure in looking. She argues that movies give us the, quote, illusion of being a privileged voyeur peeping in on a private world, unquote. However, it is also assumed that the audience member is always male, thus creating what we call the male gaze. Films were often created to relate to men more than women, so the men were always the heroes, and women were their sidekicks, their sexual objects, and so on. So the close-ups on women, especially on their legs, their lips, their breasts, are meant to be for the men. This is how gay and bisexual women become a fetish for the male viewer. Camilla going from the sexual relationship with Diane to a sexual relationship with Adam is like saying, look how hot she is. You could have a chance with her too. Big yuck. Now you might be thinking, hey, the main character of Mulholland Drive is female. So doesn't that make Betty or Camilla the heroine? Not exactly. Shohini Chaudhary, sorry for butchering your name, in response to Laura Mulvey's article, writes an article entitled The Male Gaze, where she discusses the female gaze. In a movie with a heterosexual romance, does the female viewer also relate to the man and view the woman as a sexual object? Probably not. Chaudhary goes into depth about the contradiction of relating real-life women to women on screen, and the possible narcissistic objectification of the character. But that's a bit much for now. So let's keep it simple. Consider a homosexual woman watching this film. She might be upset that the only lesbian character, Diane, ends up going insane and committing suicide. Or she might be upset that Camilla left Diane for a man. Either way, a homosexual female viewer can't relate to many characters in this film. Now consider the perspective of a heterosexual woman. She's probably not interested in Camilla and Betty physically, and probably doesn't understand why Diane goes to such lengths to make herself feel better. So what do straight women gain from watching Mulholland Drive? I'll leave that up to you in the comments. For now, let's move on to Diane's character. Now, obviously, Diane can't hang around ganging up the place, so she has to die. For more information on the Bury Your Gaze trope, you can check out my first video. Link. But before that, she has to lose her mind. As Sierra Wardlow says in her article, A Simple Favor, and that whole lesbian psycho thing, lesbianism in media is akin to female insanity. Wardlow writes, quote, here's the basic gist. In the absence of men, women become emotionally unbalanced lesbians, with the lesbianism, sexual perversion, and psychosis functioning as a fundamentally linked and inevitable triumvirate. Meaning women would literally have to be crazy to be lesbians. Or at least that's what films that use the Psycho Lesbian trope are saying. So how can we deconstruct the cute but psycho and the Psycho Lesbian tropes? My favorite example is 2017 film from Ocean Blue Entertainment, I Kill Giants. I don't want to spoil this film, so I won't give too much away. But the movie follows precious teenager Barbara Thorson on her journey through grief. Barbara clearly struggles from depression by the way she acts out in class, is emotionally and physically distant with her family, and escapes into her imagination to avoid reality. However, the film doesn't depict her as crazy or violent. Rather, it represents her struggle with mental health as an appropriate reaction to the events in her life. I highly recommend this movie. It's one of the few movies that made me cry, other than Love, Simon, not for the reasons you think, and Iron Man 3. For the Psycho Lesbian, the solution is simple. Write well-rounded, mentally stable, sympathetic queer characters that at the end don't die. Like literally anyone from Steven Universe. So why does it matter? Mental illness is largely misconstrued by society as something that is impossible to understand or dangerous. While some people may experience symptoms so severe that they completely break from reality and become violent or unresponsive, this isn't true for the majority of people. In fact, it's estimated that 26% of Americans suffer from a form of depression, and about 18% suffer from a form of anxiety disorder. In fact, it's estimated that 26% of Americans suffer from a diagnosable mental health disorder. That's a lot of people. How often do you see your neighbor running around stabbing everyone? The actual danger is convincing us that mental health should be ignored. When you don't acknowledge or treat mental illness, it can cause a series of lifelong health issues and even lead to suicide. I work part-time in a mental health residential program, but by no means am I a mental health professional. For the sake of this video, I want to define some terms, but I highly recommend you do more research on your own, and not on WebMD.
Oh, that's a relief. Now I can get back to the good stuff. The That's good.
First, what is psychosis? Psychosis is a symptom or indication of a larger health issue. Psychosis is often described as a break in reality, but that's not necessarily true. Psychosis, as defined by the National Alliance on Mental Health, is, quote, characterized as disruptions to a person's thoughts and perceptions that make it difficult for them to recognize what is real and what isn't. These disruptions are often experienced as seeing, hearing, and believing things that aren't real, or having strange, persistent thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. While everyone's experience is different, most people say psychosis is frightening and confusing, end quote. Next, what is a psychopath? Psychopathy and sociopathy both fall into the same medical category. They are both considered antisocial personality disorders. According to the U.S. National Library of Medicine, quote, psychopathy is a disorder characterized in part by shallow emotional responses, lack of empathy, impulsivity, and an increase in likelihood for antisocial behaviors, end quote. And according to the Mayo Clinic, sociopathy is, quote, a mental disorder in which a person consistently shows no regard for right and wrong and ignores the rights and feelings of others. People with antisocial personality disorder tend to antagonize, manipulate, or treat others harshly or with callous indifference. They show no guilt or remorse for their behavior. Nevertheless, the terms psychopath and sociopath are not considered medical diagnoses. Antisocial personality disorder is the correct medical term, and it affects about 3.6% of American adults. It's true that psychopathy can lead to criminal behavior, but it's also treatable and shouldn't be stigmatized by media. Content creators often want to write about this disorder without truly understanding it because it can be thrilling. It touches on our innate desire for the macabre, the surreal, but this usually leads to wild assumptions and misunderstandings. My point is that there are a lot of different disorders and illnesses that can affect our minds and emotions. And instead of villainizing people who struggle with their mental health, we should seek to understand it. As content creators, it's our job to take the target off of marginalized peoples and create something that is thought-provoking, entertaining, and overall kind. Let me just say there are tropes everywhere. Tropes are unavoidable because our media, our creations, are a mirror of our lives. And everything has basically already been written. Art is always stealing from other artists, and I get that. I'm not saying that all tropes are bad and we should avoid using them because we can't, but some tropes can be harmful. We've divided everything into acceptable and unacceptable targets. And unfortunately, mental illness is considered an acceptable target for ridicule. That is often because most people don't understand what it means to struggle with mental health. And so they've created this monstrous idea of it in media. Think of Michael Myers from Halloween, who escaped from the asylum and went on a killing spree. Actual people don't do that. In fact, about 0.000006% of the American population are serial killers. Of course, media depicts the most wild side of society because it's the most interesting thing to consume. And I get that, but it's not an excuse to problematize or fetishize mental illness. There are, of course, appropriate ways to make fun of mental illness. For example, Hannah Gadsby's bit on autism. Laughing at our mental illness while helping others to understand the reality of it is totally acceptable and actually can be healing. However, using mental health as an excuse to make a character obscene, violent, or unpredictable is not okay. Okay, so I know I've talked a lot about problematic tropes in these last 3 videos. So in the next video, I want to talk about a trope I actually really like. The monstrous feminine. If you like horror, this is the video for you. I was going to talk about mental illness as trope, but then I thought about all of the horrible movies I could watch. For now, please like and subscribe. Subscribe. Check out my link tree in the description below for my social media, my blog, and my poetry collection, The Moth That Haunts the Laundry Room. Don't forget to check out my editor, Mattastrophe, on YouTube, Mattastrophe12 on Twitch. Eventually, I'll be on Twitch too, hopefully doing some game streams. It's mostly going to be Slime Rancher. Bye!